All right, let's dive into the world of personal finance, but not the typical numbers and spreadsheet stuff. We're going deep into Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Oh, that's a good one.
It really is. It's packed with insights on how, well, our minds and our past experiences, even luck, how those things all affect the way we handle money.
Hmm.
And, forget complicated formulas. We're after the why today. Like, why do people buy lottery tickets when they can't even handle, like, a $400 emergency?
Right, right.
Or, is Bill Gates' success as much about time as it is about brilliance? Those are the sorts of questions we're tackling.
I think one of the most fascinating things Housel does is challenge this idea that finance is all about being, coldly rational.
Yeah.
He argues that being pretty reasonable is actually more important when it comes to making decisions about your money.
That makes a lot of sense. We've all made decisions that seemed logical at the time, but
Mhm.
looking back, maybe weren't the best in the long run.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that emotions and personal experiences, they really drive a lot of our financial choices.
They do.
Like, take the story of Julius Wagner-Jarrick. He was this doctor who treated syphilis with induced fevers.
Wait, induced fevers? That sounds kind of intense.
It was a risky approach, for sure,
Yeah.
but it was based on this observation that fevers, sometimes they could actually help the body fight off infection.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wagner-Jarrick, he was willing to challenge what everyone else thought, and, it actually ended up winning him a Nobel Prize.
Wow. So is the takeaway here that we should be more willing to, like, take risks with our money?
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that our aversion to discomfort,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's a fever or, the thought of losing money,
Yeah.
that discomfort can sometimes cloud our judgment.
So maybe instead of trying to completely eliminate emotions from, like, financial decisions, we should, I don't know, learn to recognize them, understand them.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to another big point from the book, this idea that the goalpost keeps moving.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So Housel uses this phrase to describe how, like, our financial goals, they often shift as we achieve more. You reach one level and suddenly you're aiming for the next, never really feeling satisfied.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that.
Right. It's like as soon as you hit a certain income level, you're like, okay, well, now I need this much. And it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's like you're on a treadmill, always running, but never really getting anywhere.
It's classic lifestyle creep. Our income grows, our expenses grow right along with it. We upgrade our house, our car, the vacations, and suddenly we're right back to feeling, financially stretched.
So, how do we break this cycle? Is it just a matter of being, like, more disciplined?
Discipline definitely helps, but Housel suggests that a big part of this is social comparison. We're constantly bombarded with images of wealth and success, which can really warp our sense of what's normal or what's enough.
Right. Like, it's easy to compare ourselves to others and feel inadequate.
Exactly. And it can be so discouraging.
Yeah.
Like, remember that story about the rookie baseball player making $500,000 a year?
Yeah.
He felt broke compared to his teammate with, a $430 million contract.
That's crazy. It's all relative.
It really is.
Oh.
So maybe the key to financial contentment is like focusing on your own goals and values rather than trying to keep up with everyone else.
That's a good point. Focus on your own lane.
Right. And this leads us to another powerful concept that Housel talked about, the idea that wealth is what you don't see.
Okay, that's intriguing. What does that mean?
It means that true wealth isn't about all the flashy things you buy, right?
Yeah.
It's about the assets you build up over time. It's about the money you diligently save, the investments that are steadily growing, the security you're creating for your future.
So it's not about how much you spend, but how much you keep.
Exactly. It's understanding this whole concept of compounding. Housel calls it this invisible force that grows your wealth.
And the less you touch it, the more powerful it becomes.
Right. Like imagine a snowball rolling downhill, gathering more and more snow as it goes.
It just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Exactly. That reminds me of, Rihanna had that lawsuit against her financial advisor.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He kept trying to tell her, look, if you keep spending all this money, you're just going to have a bunch of stuff, not the money.
Right. You'll have the things, but not the actual wealth.
It highlights this whole struggle with delayed gratification, especially in a world that's constantly pushing us to spend, spend, spend.
Yeah. So how do we become better savers in this, buy now, pay later world?
Well, Housel actually offers a pretty surprising solution. He says that increasing your humility can be a really powerful way to boost your savings.
Okay, now that's a connection I wouldn't have made.
It's kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But it's about recognizing that a lot of our spending is driven by ego. We want to impress people, show off our status.
Oh, I see.
But if we can let go of that need for external validation.
Then we can free up more resources to save and invest.
Exactly. Think about it. What are you spending money on right now that you don't really need or even truly value? Things you just buy to, like, impress others.
Wow. Yeah, when you put it that way, it's kind of eye-opening.
Right. It's like we're all probably guilty of that to some extent.
I know I am.
Housel has this great analogy to illustrate the benefits of saving. He compares it to the energy crisis.
Okay.
He points out that we overcame that crisis not by finding more oil, but by needing less.
Right. We became more efficient with the energy we had.
Exactly. We essentially increased our wealth energy. And the same principle applies to money. You increase your wealth by needing less.
So finding contentment with what we already have can actually make us wealthier in the long run.
Exactly. It's like changing our perspective can have a huge impact on our financial well-being.
That's a really powerful idea. So we've talked about saving, but what about protecting the wealth we've built?
Yeah, good point.
Like, what about those unexpected events that can throw our finances off track?
That's where Housel's analogy of card counting comes in.
Okay, card counting.
He uses it to illustrate how important it is to be prepared for things to go wrong, even if you have a winning strategy, you know?
So he's not suggesting we all become professional gamblers.
Right.
Like,
No, definitely not.
okay, good.
It's more about understanding that no matter how well we plan, stuff happens. Life throws us curveballs.
Like unexpected medical bills, job losses, that kind of thing.
Exactly. You know, remember that former Merrill Lynch executive who went bankrupt?
Oh, yeah, the one who refused to sell his $14 million house.
Yeah. That's like a textbook example of what can happen when you don't have a plan for those just-in-case moments.
Right.
Housel really emphasizes the importance of having a margin of safety in our finances. You know, things like cash reserves or less debt. That cushion can help you stay afloat when things get rough.
It's like having a financial safety net.
Exactly. Think
Yeah.
about Bill Gates. Back in the early days of Microsoft, he had this rule.
What was it?
He always wanted to have enough cash on hand to cover a year's worth of payroll, even if they had zero revenue.
Wow, that's smart. He was thinking ahead.
He understood that unexpected things happen and wanted to be prepared.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about, the news and all the negative stuff we hear about the economy? How does that play into our financial decisions?
Right. That brings us to this whole idea of narratives and how much power they have. Housel points out that the way we view the economy and the markets, it's heavily influenced by the stories we tell ourselves.
So even if the actual economic data isn't terrible, we can sort of talk ourselves into feeling pessimistic?
Exactly. It's like, you know how people say, if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news tends to grab our attention more. Housel uses this interesting analogy. Imagine an alien visiting Earth, first in 2007 and then again in 2009.
Okay.
That alien would be totally puzzled. Why is everyone suddenly feeling so much poorer in 2009? The physical world hasn't really changed that much.
It's all about perception.
Exactly. It was the narrative around the housing crisis, the fear and uncertainty, that really shifted people's perceptions and behavior.
So being aware of the narratives we're consuming and how they might be affecting our decisions is, like, really important.
Absolutely. We need to be critical thinkers and not just blindly accept everything we hear. And that brings us to another fascinating concept from the book. This one might really make you think.
Okay, hit me with it.
Housel says that our future selves are practically strangers.
Wow, I like that. That's deep.
Right. It makes you realize how hard it is to plan for the long term. Because our goals, our priorities, even our personalities, they change so much over time. It's like, who knows what our future selves will actually want or need?
It makes you question everything you're working toward.
I know. You know, I have this friend who spent his whole life wanting to be a doctor. Like, it was his dream.
Yeah.
And he finally got there, went through all the schooling, the training, the whole thing. And then he realized it was actually a terrible career for him. He had changed, but his goal hadn't.
That's wild. So are you saying we shouldn't even bother making long-term plans?
No, not at all. It's more about understanding that we need to be flexible. Things will change, will change, and our plans need to be able to adapt.
So it's less about trying to predict the future with perfect accuracy and more about creating a plan that can, like, roll with the punches.
Exactly. Recognizing that personal finance is a journey, not a destination. And it's probably going to take you in some unexpected directions.
That's a great point. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, but there's still so much more to uncover in the psychology of money. We'll be back soon to continue this exploration.
Welcome back. I'm still thinking about that whole future selves being strangers thing. It's really making me question a lot of things.
I know, right? It's like, how can we plan for a future when we don't even know who will be?
Exactly. But okay, how do we balance that need for flexibility with, still having long-term goals? It seems like a contradiction. It is a tricky balance. And this is where I think understanding the role of luck becomes really important. Housel does a brilliant job of debunking this myth that financial success is all about, hard work and brilliance.
So, are you saying that even the smartest investors, they still need a little bit of luck on their side?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
He uses the example of Bill Gates, right? Obviously, Gates is incredibly smart and driven, but he also benefited from some very fortunate circumstances.
Yeah, like being one of the few kids in the world with access to a computer back in those early days of technology.
Exactly. He went to this school, Lakeside School, one of the only schools that had a time-sharing computer terminal. That access gave him such a huge advantage. And you have to think, for every Bill Gates, there are probably thousands of other equally brilliant people who just never got that lucky break.
It's a humbling thought for sure. So, are you saying we should just give up on trying to achieve financial success and just hope for the best?
No, not at all. It's more about having a realistic perspective. Recognizing that luck plays a role in everyone's life. We can't control everything.
So, we can't control luck, but we can control how we react to it, both good luck and bad luck.
Exactly, and I think that's really crucial. Housel argues that we often overestimate skill, both when analyzing successes and failures. Like, when things go well, we're quick to pat ourselves on the back. Oh, so brilliant.
Right.
But when things go wrong, it's easy to blame ourselves for making stupid mistakes.
Yeah, it's like we think we have more control than we actually do.
Totally. Which actually brings us back to those narratives we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Housel illustrates this point through these contrasting stories. Jesse Livermore, this legendary stock trader who made a fortune during the 1929 crash. And then there's Abraham Jermansky, a real estate guy who lost everything. Both operating in the same market, facing the same economic forces, but completely different outcomes.
Right, same circumstances, different results. It really highlights how unpredictable things can be.
It does. And it's tempting to just attribute those outcomes to skill or lack thereof, but often it's about being on the right or wrong side of a random event. A lucky break or an unfortunate turn of events.
So the lesson here is to be humble about both our wins and our losses, recognizing that luck plays a role in both.
Exactly. Learn from your experiences, both positive and negative, but don't get too caught up in taking all the credit or all the blame.
This makes me think about something you said earlier about managing your money in a way that helps you sleep at night.
Oh, yeah, good point. It all ties together.
Right, it does.
Like Housel emphasizes that there's no one right way to manage your money. What works for one person might be a disaster for someone else.
Because we all have different levels of risk tolerance, different goals, different experiences.
Exactly. It's all about finding what aligns with your personality, what helps you feel secure, even when things are a little bit crazy out there.
And so it's not about chasing the highest returns, but finding a strategy you can actually stick with.
For the long haul, yeah. And that actually brings up another key element of House's philosophy. Time. He constantly reminds us that time is the investor's greatest asset.
So the longer you're in the game, the more opportunities you have to benefit from that whole compounding thing.
Exactly. Think about Warren Buffett, right? His wealth isn't just because he's a genius investor. It's also because he's been doing it for so long, like over 70 years. That extended time frame has allowed him to fully leverage the power of compounding.
Wow, 70 years. That's incredible. He's like the ultimate example of patience and long-term thinking.
He really is. I think most of us overestimate how quickly we can get rich, and we underestimate the power of slow, steady growth over time.
But it's so hard to be patient, especially when the market's going crazy and everyone's talking about the next big thing.
I know, it's like FOMO is real.
It is. So how do we avoid getting swept up in all that short-term hype and stay focused on the long game?
Housel offers a few strategies. One is to focus on what you can control. You can't control what the market does, but you can control how much you save, your asset allocation, the fees you're paying.
Great. Focus on the things within your control.
Exactly. That can help reduce some of that anxiety and give you a sense of, agency, even when things feel chaotic.
It makes sense. And what else?
Another key strategy is to be aware of your own biases.
Oh, yeah, those pesky biases like fear of missing out, overreacting to short-term market swings, all that.
Exactly. Recognizing those biases can help you make better decisions and avoid some of those, classic investing mistakes.
It all comes back to understanding our own psychology, right? How our minds work and how that influences our behavior with money.
It really does. And this brings us to another great point that Housel makes. He says, you are not a spreadsheet.
Wait, are you saying we should throw out all our budgets and financial plans?
No, no, not at all.
Okay, good.
It's more about acknowledging that we're human, right? We're emotional beings, and our decisions aren't always perfectly rational. Sometimes we make choices based on gut feelings, instincts.
It's like that story about the doctor treating syphilis with fevers. He went against all the conventional wisdom.
Yeah, he trusted his own intuition.
But how do we know when to trust our gut and when to stick to the data?
That's where experience and self-awareness come in. The more you understand your own biases, your own tendencies, the better equipped you'll be to make those judgment calls.
So it's about finding that balance between data and intuition.
Exactly. And that's what I love about the psychology of money. It encourages us to think about personal finance in a more holistic way, considering both the rational and the emotional sides of the equation.
It's not just about numbers, it's about understanding ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of understanding ourselves, let's talk about how our personal experiences shape our beliefs and behaviors around money.
Okay, that's a perfect transition to the next part of our deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore how our unique life stories influence our relationship with money. Welcome back to our deep dive into the psychology of money. We're getting into some really interesting territory now, exploring how our own personal experiences shape our relationship with money.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Housel really emphasizes that no two people have the same financial journey.
It's true.
We all come to the table with different experiences, values, even like scars from past financial events.
Like, John F. Kennedy during the Great Depression.
Oh, yeah.
His family, they were incredibly wealthy. Their fortune actually grew during that time. And he later admitted that he had no real understanding of what most people went through.
Right. It's like even these major global events, they can be experienced so differently based on individual circumstances.
For sure.
And those experiences, especially early on in life, they can have such a lasting impact on how we view things like money, risk, reward.
Makes you wonder, how much of our financial behavior is driven by those deep-seated beliefs that we formed, like back in childhood or adolescence?
A lot, probably. It's a huge factor. Like, think about someone who grew up during a period of high inflation.
Yeah.
They might be way more averse to holding cash than someone who's only ever known stable prices.
That makes sense.
Or, someone who watched their parents struggle with debt, they might be super cautious about borrowing money, even if it's for a good investment.
It's like we develop this, financial DNA based on those early experiences.
That's a great way to put it. And those tendencies, they can be tough to break, even when we understand them logically.
So true.
And this actually brings us to one of the core challenges that Housel talks about in the book, the struggle so many people have with saving money.
It's a big one.
And he really digs into the psychology behind it, why saving can be so hard for so many of us. It's not just about discipline or, understanding how finances work, like some people might say.
Right.
There's often deeper psychological stuff going on. Think about it. That fear of missing out, that constant pressure to keep up with everyone else, have the latest gadgets, the nicest clothes, the most, Instagrammable vacation.
It's that keeping up with the Joneses mentality. It can really sabotage your financial goals.
Totally. And it's everywhere, especially with social media. We're constantly bombarded with images of wealth and like this perfect life.
It's hard to escape. But Housel offers a pretty surprising solution, right? He connects the ability to save with humility.
It's one of the most insightful parts of the book, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's about realizing that so much of our spending is driven by ego. We want to impress people, show off.
I see.
But if we can detach from that need for external validation,
Yeah.
we free up so many more resources to save and invest for our future.
It's about aligning our spending with our values, not our insecurities.
Exactly. It's asking yourself, what truly brings me joy, not what will make other people think I'm successful.
Such a good point.
It's a big shift in perspective.
Huge.
And it can lead to a much more fulfilling and, financially secure life. Housel uses this other great analogy to drive home this point about saving. He compares it to the energy crisis.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. We overcame it not by finding more oil, but by needing less.
Exactly. We got more efficient,
Yeah.
which essentially increased our wealth energy.
So finding contentment with what we already have, appreciating what we have, that can actually make us wealthier.
It's kind of a paradox, right?
It is.
But it's so true, and I think that message is especially important today, in this consumer society that's always telling us we need more, more, more.
It's easy to get caught up in that.
Yeah, it's all around us.
So it's even more important to resist that pressure to consume and cultivate a sense of gratitude for what we already have.
I think that's a great takeaway. And I think that's a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive into the psychology of money, this idea that personal finance is deeply personal. There's no magic formula for everyone because we all have different goals, values, experiences.
Right. So maybe instead of searching for that perfect financial plan, we should focus on understanding ourselves better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Recognizing that we're not robots. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to experience setbacks. We'll be influenced by our emotions.
It's all part of being human. And I think embracing that humanness is key to creating a healthy and fulfilling relationship with money.
I couldn't agree more. Be kind to yourself. Be patient. Remember that this is a journey.
It is. And on that note, I want to encourage everyone listening to reflect on their own money story.
Yeah.
What lessons have you learned? What choices are you making for reasons that even you might not fully understand? And remember, this journey to financial well-being, it's a lifelong adventure. Enjoy the ride. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the psychology of money. We'll see you next time.